some of the top designers in the States, top designers in the world are here. This is a great opportunity to meet some very influential and inspiring people, and IDSA is able to pull that together. So these in-person connections is what we wanted to keep, and then now going back to that service design model, like how can we realign our programming to ensure that we are maximizing the potential for people to meet one-on-one in person.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
In this episode, a talk with Chris Livaudais, Executive Director of IDSA, the Industrial Design Society of America, the leading organization on industrial design based in the States. IDSA promotes the value and impact of industrial design and has built the largest community of industrial designers, with local chapters across the States. Our conversation happened at the recent IDSA International Design Conference in Chicago, which is curated and hosted by IDSA. The conference looked into the future of industrial design and beyond. A really amazing conference with some of the most forward-thinking designers living today. Designers and IDSA collaborated closely in bringing episodes with some of the IDC speakers to you. With Chris, I dive into the future of industrial design as well as his exciting journey. Enjoy. All right, I'm with Chris Livaudais today.
Hello.
And who's actually Executive Director of IDSA.
That's right.
And we're here at the IDC conference, so how was the conference so far?
I think it's going well, but I've been kind of behind the scenes and running around like crazy. So
Yeah.
I've seen lots of smiles and people connecting and shaking hands. And so I'm happy that that's all happening. And you presented, you did a great job. So from my perspective, it seems like it's going great.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe to give the audience a little bit of context about your background, maybe you can make a quick run to your journey and where
Sure.
it all started out.
Yeah, I went to Auburn University, which is in Alabama, to study industrial design. I actually applied to Auburn in architecture, and then because I didn't know what industrial design was as a profession, so I thought architecture was the only way that I could make a living and be creative in some way. And then during the very first stages of getting enrolled in the school, they told me about industrial design. I actually said my passion was drawing cars, and they're like, "Oh, that's industrial design. You should do that." So I immediately switched majors, and I never took one architecture class. I went straight to industrial design and never looked back. So I finished school, and it was kind of a challenge to find a job. And as you may imagine, in Alabama, there's not too much design going on right now. In terms of industrial design, at least. So I was working, doing graphic design for a while, and actually user interface of screens before I really knew what that was as well. So, and this is also back in the days of CD-ROMs. So I was creating menus and buttons and user interfaces for digital information. And then finally I found my way up to Atlanta. I got a job as an industrial designer working with a architectural water fountain company. So large-scale architectural water features. Think the Bellagio, that kind of stuff. But we didn't do that one, but that's the kind of scale. So that was really fun, and that was my first actual work doing physical things. But in many cases, we're ultimately designing water. So the physical thing that I was designing was not really the important part. The important part was what the water looks like when it leaves the jet or when it's in the air. So that was kind of an interesting kind of challenge. And so it was spray effects, lighting, sound, all these different kind of things. So that was really fun. Then the recession happened in America, and water features at that scale are kind of a not a necessity, really.
Yeah.
So the budgets got cut, so there was not too much work in water fountains. And I was able to find work with another firm in Atlanta called In Reality that was doing retail design, so environments, showrooms, and I was kind of able to leverage my work doing water features and large environments and spaces, thinking about water feature in terms of an experience. What are the users kind of feeling? What emotion do we want them to have whenever they see this thing or walk by it or even interact with it in some cases. And then that actually correlated quite well to the retail environment, how people shop, and kind of thinking about psychology of shopping and what experience you want people to have with products. So I worked there as an industrial designer and worked my way up to creative director with them. And then we also did a whole lot of research, and that also got me into like service design and research and use over sort of digital interactions and responsive environments, all kinds of stuff. So industrial design was just kind of one small piece of that puzzle. My wife is also an industrial designer, so she got a job in San Francisco. So we packed up and moved to San Francisco. And my last job before starting with IDSA was I started freelancing. And I was working with an aircraft manufacturer, and we were doing kind of the future visioning for urban aerial mobility. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of research involved with that, kind of service journey mapping and designing a service. What would a user want out of a flying taxi, so to speak. So we were doing the electric vertical takeoff landing vehicles. So I was doing a lot of initial research on how users might interact with that. Our learnings then influenced the design of the aircraft. So that was like a 6-month contract. It was a great job. The project is still going. Mm-hmm. But right around the time that ended, this opportunity with IDSA opened up. Throughout that entire my professional career, I was a volunteer with IDSA. So it was sort of a natural progression. I was already working actually with this society on some future visioning kind of work and forecasting where we could be, 10, 20 years down the road. So they asked me to come in, and here we are. Mm-hmm. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, great. The vertical landing project you just mentioned, was there an in-house team as well, or were you the only designer, or what was the team?
It was with, so the aircraft manufacturer, they had their own engineers and designers that were all in-house, and then we were working at sort of a special projects team that was in Silicon Valley.
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah. So it was myself and 2 other sort of UX experienced type designers, pretty multidisciplinary in their approach. So we led and kind of developed the plan for research. We did lots of research in the U.S. We also went to Dubai, which is amazing. To do research there.
They're quite progressive.
That's definitely a city that would want a vehicle like that. They love to be the first and the best and the biggest. So that was really amazing. So like I said, we took what we learned from those interviews and testing different kind of very simple prototypes with users during those research sessions, and we fed all that information in terms of recommendations to the design team and the engineering team. They basically said, we can make anything fly. So you tell us what the users want, and they'll make it fly. So, and now they've just developed sort of a prototype of what their vehicle is, and it's a sort of scale model, and so they've been just releasing that. So it's really exciting to see it go. And
yeah, it sounds like a super exciting project.
It was amazing. Yeah. And it was fun because I kind of stumbled on that job. And when I was talking to the team originally, it sounded almost too good to be true. I had at that time, no transportation experience. And I was like, are you sure you want me to be a part of this? I've never done flying vehicles, And they were like, no, it's great. With my service background, the research that I had done, kind of holistic thinking about how people use a service and how that connects digital and physical interactions, all that stuff kind of came full circle with that project.
Yeah, I think the aspect about multidisciplinary design, having like different perspectives there involved, I think is like super interesting because you have to think automatically about a journey and a service experience, but then there's also the product and how these 2 aspects are informing each other, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Would you say you're an industrial designer then today at the moment, or how would be your definition then?
I guess, I still love industrial design as it's classically defined, I think. So I do define myself as an industrial designer, as a designer in general. I've struggled with that question, especially, before this role when I was looking for new work, and how do I because I was not a sort of specialist, and I don't have a lot of classic industrial design kind of experience, in my professional career. But So I called myself a generalist with remarkable specialty. So I was really good at research and the service kind of ecosystem and mapping all that out and understanding experience and understanding, like I said, the connections, digital and physical, and finding threads that tie it all together. And when it came to designing things, I can also help with that too. So before this job, I was just a sort of designer, and I could help in many different facets. So, but it's an interesting question, and I think lots of folks struggle with: do I stay in one vertical, or do I call myself multidisciplinary?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of talk about like T-shaped designers, right? That kind of topic. What is your view on that? Like, industry designers trying to embrace other disciplines. I mean, especially the current, job market, this has been really also a trend that, people try to break out a little bit or try to emphasize other aspects. What's your view on it's also called hybrid design very often.
I think it's a necessity for industrial designers. I mean, very few products, other than the chair we're sitting in or this table, are kind of standalone objects like that anymore. Pretty much everything now is having a sensor in it of some type, and which means it's connected to a system and a service and some sort of back end. So I think any responsible industrial designer should also understand what that means, just literally how it works, kind of at that level, but also what it means and what that responsibility entails. Of now you're starting to collect user data. Now you're starting to have your little thing be connected to this larger ecosystem. So the designer needs to be responsible for that, and I think should also want to work on that larger ecosystem, so it all carries the same kind of brand message if you're working for a brand, or carries the same design language, and so that the user ends up getting a seamless experience.
Mm-hmm. How could industry designers approach this? I mean, if you study industrial design, would it be through the work experience that you get to know these other disciplines, or what would be a good way for designers to tap into these kind of different disciplines? Do you have any? Yeah,
probably. I mean, it seems like schools are starting to teach more like a classic industrial design coursework. Might have a project where they pair you with students who are doing digital, or even with an engineering team. All of my work was very practical, and like I said, my first job I was doing more or less print graphic design, and then it turned into doing digital UX, and I didn't know that was even a thing at that time. I knew that a GUI, the graphic user interface, and that's what we called it, but I had no formal training there. But I, through industrial design, knew enough about a consistent sort of user experience that we should always probably keep a button in the same corner, so that when people come back to this, they know where to go. So I was able to apply learnings from classic industrial design to a digital platform in that case. I also think that's one of the great kind of beautiful things about an industrial design training, is that I believe it does prepare you to do quite a lot. From an IDSA standpoint, it's like that's a beauty and a challenge too, because our membership does so many things. We have furniture designers and car designers and everything else in between. And how do we as an organization support them with programming, and then how do you support them across their entire career? We can talk about that later, but I think industrial design is I'm biased obviously, but I think it's a career path and a profession that enables and prepares people with a creative mindset to do a lot of different diverse kind of work. And then it's through that diversity, and it's through when you actually get out into the workforce, you're going to be working with multidisciplinary teams. You learn from them, they learn from you, and you go from there.
Yeah, I think it was also interesting. There have been a lot of you just were mentioning the struggle of like, how do you define yourself, right? A lot of new, different, interesting definitions, right? So, say for example, I'm a industrial designer, I'm a D plus UX, or a product experience designer, or industrial and experience designer, or experience designer in general. So this has been, I think a lot of people struggle with this.
You've been doing these interviews, so I'd be curious what you've been hearing too.
So you also, like you were mentioning, executive director at IDSA, and it's really interesting being here at the conference. Maybe we can talk a little bit about your role and maybe to give the people a little bit of context. What is actually IDSA for the people maybe in Asia and outside of the US?
Yeah. So IDSA stands for Industrial Designers Society of America. It's a professional membership society. It's a professional organization for individual professional designers. It's over 50 years old. It was started by some of the great industrial designers that you might have studied about in school. Charles Eames was the keynote at our very first conference, which was actually right here in Chicago back in, I think, 1965. So there's a tremendous history with the organization. And the goal of the organization is pretty simple. So we want to provide our community and the public at large a resource and knowledge base about industrial design and support professional designers, through their entire career, all the way from when they graduate from school and enter the workforce, and then all the way till they retire. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when did you join the new role?
I started it was 2018. So I was asked by the board of directors to come on as an interim capacity. So the outgoing executive director retired, and so they needed somebody to fill. And so initially it was just supposed to be a 1-year job. I knew it was an interim position, but at the same time, I didn't want to be what's called a sitting duck. I didn't want to just be here and sit in a chair and not do anything. I had a whole bunch of volunteer experience with the organization. It's something that I was deeply passionate about. It's supported me through my entire career as well. So, and I already knew all of our headquarters staff pretty well, so I was able to just kind of start working. And like I said, I didn't want to be here for a year and not try to improve things. I look at the work as a design project, as a service design project. IDSA provides a service to our community, to our membership, and we have thousands and thousands of little touch points. Some of them can be improved, some of them can be gotten rid of altogether and combined. And so one of the first things we did was kind of hold a workshop, and as an organization, our headquarter team with our board of directors, we wanted to be a designful organization. We wanted to practice what we preach, and let's use the methodologies that we use in the real world with improving the organization. So it's been great. And around the middle of 2018, the board approached me and asked me if I wanted to stay on full time. I was already elbow deep in trying to change things and make stuff happen. So I said yes, and here we are. So
yeah, great.
The organization is based in Virginia, and I am based in San Francisco, which in and of itself is also a pretty big change. But San Francisco and the Bay Area has a massive design community. It's also one of our largest chapters. So it made sense for us to have a presence there, and technology allows for you to work from anywhere now. So
most people are located remotely of the team, or is it?
No, so there's 2 of us in San Francisco. I have somebody in New York, and then everybody else is in Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then flying here for the conference. Actually,
yeah, and then here we are in Chicago, so everybody flies up here for the event. Yeah.
You were mentioning it's a service design project. Did you draw out a customer journey yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure. That's and we multiple versions of it, right? Students, young professionals, somebody who's 5, 10, 15 years into their career, and even into retirement. How can we support that entire arc?
Yeah,
and how do we align our programming to that? Same thing with our pillars I mentioned. Education, community, information, advocacy. Let's make sure our programming fills those verticals, aligns to those pillars, and if we can't make it align to those, then it needs to be improved, or so that it does, or combined with other programming, or maybe we shouldn't do it anymore because it doesn't help us serve the purpose of what the organization is meant to do.
Yeah, it's super interesting as you talk about applying design for a design organization.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and because we have a very picky audience, and as a
they notice.
Creating a service for designers is incredibly challenging because they're picky. They do this work in their real life. They work on brands and they work on digital interfaces, and so they expect a pretty high level of quality from us in the service that we provide back to them.
Yeah. At IDC, generally speaking, we also chat a little bit before about like the transformation of IDSA.
Yeah.
So it would be super interesting to hear more about that. Like, how do you want to transform it?
I touched on it a little bit, but when I started, it was an organization that, to be honest, needed work, and I think a lot of people knew that. We were just kind of maybe looking for a new direction or purpose, and lots of associations, though. We were certainly not immune. I mean, pretty much every association of our type. I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, but lots of associations are struggling with a membership type model. Mm-hmm. And how do you provide value for membership? What's the value proposition? Mm-hmm. Why should somebody pay annually to be a part of this society when you can get pretty much anything online now? And there's all kinds of online digital communities, that you can have access to. So it's sort of like, you kind of have to have a heart-to-heart with yourself and with the organization and say, what can we do and who are we in this new ecosystem? The society and lots of other ones like us struggle to keep up with the rapid pace of the internet and social media, and how do we now live in this new ecosystem? So this was kind of the first workshop that we did, was like understanding that landscape. Let's be honest about it, and then let's find a way for us to navigate to a new space. We realized in this, and I've benefited from it, that if you ask somebody who's been a part of IDSA for a while, or even new folks, young students, what's the best thing you get out of it? And they often will say, well, it's because I met so-and-so, or I made a connection with this person. And I shook this person's hand. I made a very personal connection, one-on-one. And even this event, I mean, that's why we have 450 people. Some of the top designers in the States, top designers in the world are here. This is a great opportunity to meet some very influential and inspiring people. Mm-hmm. And IDSA is able to pull that together. So these in-person connections is what we wanted to keep. And then now, going back to that service design model, like how can we realign our programming to ensure that we are maximizing the potential for people to meet one-on-one in person? Mm-hmm. Both by the events like this, the biggest one we do, but also now how do we provide support to all of our local chapters? So we have 27 chapters across the country that are based in cities, and they are supposed to support the community in those local areas. So my team needs to now provide support for them so that they can operate and do their own little events, happy hours and panel discussions and things. Again, getting people in a room to talk to each other, make connections. That's what we're focusing on now. So the change so in many ways, we're kind of going back to what we've always been good at. But we also have to realize that we're in this kind of new digital ecosystem and finding ways to leverage that with the focus on getting people to connect personally, one-on-one, and shake hands, pass out business cards, all that good stuff.
So what's also interesting at IDC, you actually dropped the industrial design out of the conference name.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the whole mission of IDC and the conference and what you try to accomplish?
So just like with the society and all the shifting landscape there's tons of new competition in the event space, and you have events like South by Southwest and events that Adobe puts on that are now fundamentally competition for what we used to have as basically the only industrial design conference. And so now you have all these other things that if you ask your boss to send you somewhere for an event and they say, okay, you can go to one event per year, how do we make IDSA's event attractive enough when you compare it to something like Adobe Max or South by Southwest? It's very difficult. And those events are dramatically different scales than what we put on. Yeah. But if you're telling your boss you want to go to one event per year, how do we make ours, juicy enough to hold that attention? So, So we sort of rebranded as part of IDSA's rebrand and kind of rethinking. IDC was our first sort of statement of this is the new organization, and this is the new kind of experience that we're trying to put out and provide for folks who are in attendance. It's now the International Design Conference. That name had been used before. The event started as our national meeting, then it turned into a national conference. Mm-hmm. Somewhere it turned into an international conference. Mm-hmm. And then we wanted it to, as the International Design Conference, to just be, a beacon for industrial design, but also design in general, and be a very inspirational thing. Focus on highly curated content, get great speakers who are doing great work, provide opportunities for networking and social and parties and all this kind of stuff. But we've also been saying that it's an event that has an industrial design bias. We want to protect space for industrial design. So we want to invite lots of different types of designers. Like we started the talk. I mean, most people in reality work with a multidisciplinary team. So let's get lots of different folks in the room who can share their work, maybe in a different space. But at the same time, we want to be able to provide a voice for industrial design. So imagine if we have 10 people on stage throughout the day, we want six of them to somehow have a connection to industrial design. Mm-hmm. And then the other 4 might be something weird or a total different design discipline. Mm-hmm. It's also really interesting how we had lots of people present who started their career in industrial design, but then are now doing something maybe more digital or more service or research. And so again, it kind of goes back to show how the industrial design education can prepare you to do all kinds of different things. Mm-hmm. So IDC is now in its second version or its second year here in Chicago. We're just focusing on sort of total end-to-end experience. Mm-hmm. Even the stuff that happens before you get to the event. Again, applying standard kind of service design methodologies and custom journey mapping it all out. And what do the emails look like? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of the event. And then how can we follow up after the event and kind of keep things going? And what's the cadence of posting videos and all this kind of stuff? How can it live online? So just, again, thinking it all through, being very designful and intentional with how we curate the content so that we can hopefully create something that has value and is inspirational. We're not doing this event in a hotel like we used to do. We're doing it, in this case, in a very beautiful, very modern building. Last year, we were in this old kind of cool warehouse. So we wanted to put people in environments that are inspiring or different or interesting in some way. And then just have a central stage where we're celebrating design at the highest level.
Mm-hmm. Why did you choose Chicago? I maybe could come up with some reasons for that, but it would be interesting to get also your view on.
Yeah, let me know if these align to what you think. I mean, so we have a chapter here. Yeah, it's one of our larger chapters. So we have a great community of industrial designers. Chicago as a city has a great history with design, architecture, culture, and arts. So it seems like a good fit from that regard as well. This is the city that we've had the most of our national events here.
Oh, okay.
Over the years. I forget the count, but like I said, the first one we ever did in 1965 was in Chicago. Oh, okay. So we've sort of had this ongoing relationship with the city, and I'll talk about the chapter too. So the Chicago professional chapter has been building momentum. They're doing a lot of their own great work, and we wanted to kind of leverage that energy and bring the IDC to a city that is known for creativity and known for having lots of interesting things to look at and be a part of. It's the city has a great culture, so we wanted to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. So that's why we picked. Mm-hmm. What did you think?
Yeah, I think there's so many amazing design studios here as well. I think just to add on what you were just saying, right? There's so many really amazing design studios here, and big industrial design community, and some makes a lot of sense for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's also outside of the US known as a place where a lot of great industrial design is happening. Certainly all over the place in the US, but I think one of the main hotspots.
And I want to get to a point where this is international in that we host it in a different city outside of the U.S. I mean, this is a sort of a challenge with IDSA. You know, America is in our name, right? So Industrial Designers Society of America. So how do we now live in a global world, and how do we bring different voices together? If we're having an international conference, we want to represent in an international way, and having you a part of it is one way we do that. But it makes it makes sense in future iterations of this that we actually bring it somewhere else and become a global conference of some sort. So it'll be exciting to see where we go, and hopefully in a couple of years maybe we'll be able to go to Milan or Mexico City or some other cool country. Yeah.
Sounds great. I want to talk a little bit about the future of industrial design and where you see. I think during the conference, I think it's also a great moment or a great space to reflect on that, because there's so many inspiring talks here. Where do you see industrial design going? We touched on some aspects of that, but
I think there's always going to be physical things that need someone to design them, right? So there's always that need for the very tactile experience and for someone to sort of craft that, and materials and manufacturing and the more classic kind of industrial design. But the reality is, like we're saying, everything's going to start to be connected if it's not already. And now all of a sudden you're talking about designing for a much larger system. So industrial designers should not only have the knowledge of making the physical things and learning how to get things actually made and taking ideas and producing something, but it's also going to be connected to the system. Another big piece is the responsibility that comes with data collection and how all that's managed. And then also, I think industrial designers should and are kind of becoming more conscious of the social impacts of their work. And environmental impacts of their work, designing things that can be broken apart so they can be recycled, or using materials that have a clean origin story and a clean ending story. It's difficult to do all that, right? The magical industrial designer is somehow going to be excellent in all those different fields, right? It's impossible. But that's again why I think our profession is also collaborative in nature, right? So that's why we need the teams of folks to work together, and we can pull in people who have different expertise areas. And as long as we protect, the physical aspect of whatever we're making, and protect the interest of the user and the brand and what we're trying to build for, and hold that special, we bring in all the other voices to help collaborate with and hopefully put something out that's useful and functional and beautiful, but also is responsible with how it's used, and that's the future.
I think as the podcast is also a lot about like the impact of design, and should inspire young designers about driving positive change. You were just pointing out, for example, sustainability. I want to talk a little bit about the responsibility of industrial design and the impact industrial design can have on the planet. So could you maybe from your perspective outline that a little bit about aspects or impact of industrial design?
I'll tell you a story of a friend of mine who a long time ago designed one of the first versions of the little disposable toothpick. Like it was the plastic little toothpick that was meant to be a single-use item, basically. Like the little toothpick it has a little floss thing on it. And he designed it. It launched. It's great. They've sold zillions of them. And then one day he said he was walking down the street. He saw one on the ground, on the sidewalk. And he instantly was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I've kind of created this thing which is useful and it has a clear purpose, but it's a single-use item that all of a sudden has no value, literally no value once it's done. And the recycling kind of chain that once you've used that product was not, at that time, not set up to even take care of a product like that, to be able to disassemble it or put it into a recycling system. So the shift from like, okay, I made this great product, it's useful, people love it, but there was a whole nother story that wasn't being considered at that time. So again, designers are now, hopefully, they're becoming more conscious, more aware of that entire arc, and are preparing for it. And they're preparing the brands that they're working for. If they're in a firm or if they're working at an in-house team, they should be the ones advocating for that with their project teams and even the business cohorts that are helping the project move forward. That you're not just making one single thing, and you have to consider so many different factors, and the impact, hopefully, in all that is the designer is there as this kind of ever-present voice, and like I said, for the user, for the utility and beauty of the product, how it's made, and how do you source, making sure you're responsible when there's picking factories that are up to code and making things to without being wasteful, and hopefully the impact is the designer being the advocate for trying to do great things and not tip the balance in any one way too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also the difference between output and outcome in a way. So
sure.
I think thinking more about actually what's happening after the output, right?
Yeah.
What's the actual impact of the product or experience or whatever you create, both for the human, but also I think on a larger footprint for the planet. I think this kind of thinking is important. There has been a lot of talk also about the value of industrial design. Johnny Ive being, for example, part of the board. More and more companies embracing that. There have been a lot of acquisitions from consultancies being bought by or design consultancies bought by other consultancies or other companies. I wonder a little bit about your view on that topic.
You could say some of that trend started with the design thinking and how can we use an empathetical approach to solving business problems, and use collaborative methods to solve those problems instead of just being stuck on a spreadsheet of some sort. Involving users early on and testing and prototyping and iteration, all these kinds of things. So the impact is, when that's done successfully, maybe you have something like Apple where the value of making beautiful products has a direct correlation to the success of a business. They are one of those shining examples of something like that. We like to position them that way, right? And we think Johnny was the one who ushered that in, right? And Steve. But there's tons of other companies who are sort of known as design companies, or are trying to reposition and pivot themselves to say, we are a design company, and we have a good in-house design team, and we can do that, and we leverage that in all these different ways. And then there's been research that shows, McKinsey did a long study and published it not too long ago, that shows that when design is kind of central to the business, good outcomes can happen, whatever that is, if you're making a product or a service. And that's not necessarily industrial design, but I think it is just a designer's approach to solving problems creatively and collaboratively, really. It's not a single person to do it, but it's a sort of the result of lots of different inputs can create a powerful outcome.
You were mentioning design thinking as one of the drivers for it. I think industrial design definitely also had a big influence in that kind of growth, or I think how design was understood, and I think largely the footprint of design. I wonder a little bit about your view also on that. I chatted with other people also about that, design being commoditized to a topic of design thinking and these topics. So I wonder a little bit about your view on that.
Design thinking for me was the sort of Trojan horse that got us a seat at the table, right? It allowed maybe a business or a group who wouldn't have considered the need for design. They allowed us to kind of have a voice, right? And it started to allow for a language exchange between the business world and the design world, so that they could understand what we're doing, and we could show them, and we could teach them, and they could teach us, right? It has, of course, been over ubiquitized and overextended and used in so many different ways that maybe it's lost some of its initial impact. But I still think there's value in the design thinking term and how it kind of came to be, right? I've led workshops where you facilitate a session and you get a group of people who are not designers to get up and use stickies and draw on the whiteboards and be creative and sketch out scenarios instead of typing out things. And then it always gets to the end where it's like, okay, now's when we do work. You have to go home. You have to go back to your office, and like now you need to work on these great ideas that we just came up with. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't happen, that's when design thinking suffers, because it's just seen as, oh, I did this activity, we had some fun, we used colorful stickies and we drew with crayons. This is great. We talked to some users, but now what? And the design doing is the result of, okay, now we have to take action on these ideas. And also, that's maybe where industrial designers are good, right? Like, we're good at making things, like in theory, and we're good at producing stuff and taking ideas from a sketch and to a rendering and to modeling and prototyping and working with manufacturing. So we have the ethos that's kind of embedded in us, hopefully, that's like a hot sketch is not enough. You have to continue the project, and it's only until it's out in the world, then it's done, right? And then, but as we just discussed, it's out in the world, great. Okay, then how does it live after that? What's the disposal life cycle, and what happens after that? So designers love telling stories, and so I think that's also part of our why we're good at kind of continuing to think what's next, or even work backwards. Where does this project start? And another activity that I like to do is called Draw Toast, and you ask people to just draw how you would make toast. So people get a piece of bread and you draw it and you put it in the toaster and put some butter on it. Some people will say, okay, well, I go to the store and I buy a loaf of bread and then I do it. But then you ask the question, well, where did the store get the bread? Okay, you go back to the farmer. All of a sudden the story becomes complex and long, and you see that a piece of toast is part of a much larger complex system.
You end up with the story about people inventing fire, right?
Yeah, right. You could take it back forever.
Looking back on IDC, have been there any big realizations for you? Any big inspirations for you during the conference? Just the first day now, so
yeah, we're only in the first day.
Yeah.
No, the biggest thing for me always is just seeing people in the room. I mean, we've been working on this for a year basically. So as soon as we finished in New Orleans, it was all eyes on Chicago and building this experience. And so seeing it come to light, seeing people in the room, and seeing great presentations, that's the exciting part for me. So far, I haven't had the chance to sit through too many of the sessions, but I love hearing all the talks when I get to. I haven't really heard any themes. I mean, that's always fun too, to see how a collection of very different speakers can still sometimes carry a very similar theme, and I hope some of those bubble up too.
Mm-hmm. Maybe to wrap this up as a last question to the young design students, what would be your advice for young industrial design students?
Get ready and stay hungry. I think it's a wild ride what design can do, and I think I wish I would have told myself when I was coming out of school that your first job or your second job does not define you, and it's a long journey, and you always have time to, especially now with people don't stay at their offices too long, where their workplace typically, you change every 2 or 3, 4 years, and so learn as much as you can while wherever you're working, no matter what you're designing, and then take that and then apply it to someone else or somewhere else. And then I'd also say, do as much as you can to give back. I mean, that's, again, kind of community and what IDSA is all about. I've gotten so much by hopefully giving back to people and providing opportunities, right? So a lot of what I do now in this work with IDSA is I'm trying to put everyone that I can on stage. I want to give you a platform and help you with your career, give you opportunities to speak at conferences, and give you opportunities to have interactions with great designers. Just an hour ago upstairs, there was a student sitting across the table from with a CEO, designer from a company, and it's like, this wouldn't happen. Like, this is only possible because of events like this. And now this student has a great opportunity to talk with this person and learn from them. Hopefully they connect. Maybe they get a job. Who knows? But now otherwise there'd be no other way for those two people to meet. And so that's what these events are all about for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think giving back. I mean, it's also the topic of this podcast, right? Like the whole idea, and I think there's so much value in that. And maybe as the last question, is there any specific topic industrial design students should be really aware or embrace? Some other people said, obviously sustainability, rapid manufacturing is a big one. Yeah. Is there any topic that really that you really see is going to be really big and people should embrace?
Not necessarily. I guess a theme of this talk and this conversation seems to be just the idea of systems and interconnectedness of people, but also with the products you design. Yeah. So that's what I would say is you're making a product, but it lives in a much larger world. So try to consider as much of that other stuff as you can.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all that.
Thank you. It's great.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.